We can just like get like started by like talking about like George Mason and how you
Yeah,
kind of like chose your major, like what inspired you to go into the political science and that defense.
yeah. So my first experience with political science or just like politics in general was working for Senator Manka Dhingra in the 45th district in my hometown of Redmond, Washington.
So how like you mentioned like some things like these are like the things like stand out, but like do you know like any like qualities or things that you have to be involved in that would help you like stand out even more?
Okay, here's another thing.
Uh-huh.
Be careful about resume stacking.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the NextGen Podcast. My name is Meghna. I'm a senior at UCSD, and I'm super excited to be starting this new podcast where we'll be talking about school, work, life, and everything in between. Every episode will feature a different guest and a different topic. And today I'm super excited to be introducing my good friend, Daksha Magesh. For those of you that don't know, Daksha and I have known each other since high school. And
Yeah,
in
really
fact,
long time.
yeah. And we actually started Venus Inspired together. So, Daksha, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been nice to like come back and be part of your new venture.
So, I guess before we want to like get started, I think maybe we should like talk about like how we kind of know each other. I guess
Yeah,
from
absolutely. And we met at Tesla STEM High School. We're both from Seattle. I don't know, I think we had each other for bio. We had each
yeah,
other for honors
for
bio.
bio,
And
yeah.
yeah. And so that's kind of how we know each other from. And we just became really good friends, right? We had, our little group of people that we know. We're still friends with them to this day, but that's kind of how we got our start. And the whole purpose behind Venus Inspire was to provide a platform for women that essentially just gives them a platform to talk, and allows an audience to relate to them on a wide scale level. So unfortunately, I had to drop out for other reasons. Moved across the country to go to college, which took up a lot of my time. But I'm still very much pro the message of just allowing people to relate to each other on a wide level, especially women from so many different fields. It's really great if they have like role models they can ask questions to and follow. And so that's been the sort of goal that we originally had and continue to have.
And for those of you that don't know my side of the story, Daksha, I had just changed schools, and Daksha was one of my first friends that I actually met. And to think of it, actually, we were like the only two Indian girls in that
We
class.
were.
We
We
were.
totally were.
So I think we kind of connected on like a deeper level too, because I like walked into that class and I'm like, I like look around. It's a completely very STEM oriented school. Like that was the name of the school, literally. But it was
Yeah.
like I walk in and she's like the only Indian girl. I'm like, okay, there's got to be like some deeper connection over here.
No, there are a lot of Indians at the school, just in
Yeah.
this class for whatever reason, there just
Mhm.
weren't. I remember like that first Diwali also, like we had a great time just celebrating because we both like
Uh-huh.
actually dressed up to come to school because our school did that. So it was really nice to connect with someone on a deeper basis just from our background. We also speak the same languages, come from very similar backgrounds. So that was also really great.
Yeah. We can just like get like started by like talking about like George Mason and how you
Yeah.
kind of like chose your major, like what inspired you to go into the political science and that defense.
Yeah. So my first experience with political science or just like politics in general was working for Senator Manka Dhingra in the 45th district in my hometown of Redmond, Washington. And so at the time, she asked if I would be willing to, just like help out on our campaign. And so that was like my first look into like campaign politics and what it's like to knock on doors during a campaign, answer calls. And I was doing everything from like basically directing ads or like, starring in ads to, knocking on people's doors, which is a very interesting experience, I'll tell you. So that kind of inspired me to look further into government and law. And that's when I came across George Mason University, which has an amazing undergraduate political science program. And we have the Schar School here, Schar School of Policy and Government, has multiple majors for people who are interested in policy-related fields. And both that school and the honors college here, which is just an alternate interdisciplinary set of classes, really, really drew me to George Mason because it was such a great environment. And it's like 30 minutes from DC, which was awesome.
So you mentioned like the honors college. Is it like a sorority program? Like, do you have like specific housing and you like hang out with those type of like students like all day, or is it
Yeah,
just
so
like
basically, well, it's not a sorority. It's more so think of it like an inner college inside of Mason. So it's basically a very I'm so sorry. Now. There's essentially your first year you do a very research-based class, and there is a learning community on campus that you can live with other honors college students. And that first year was very helpful because I was super homesick. I was away from home, and it kind of really helped me settle in because we were all taking the same classes. And I still live in the honors college learning community today just because it's so convenient being on campus. There are campus like honors college events. But the coursework you take rather than your usual English, math, science, like core classes, basically, you take more interdisciplinary classes that have more to do with like research and other, academic fields. Like, for example, one of my classes was narrative journalism, and like that doesn't have anything really to do with my major, but really teaches you a lot of skills that you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, when you mentioned like honors college, I was like, is it like a sorority type thing, or is it just like a club?
We do have Greek life, I think, but honors college is more like through Mason's academic.
Okay. So you're still like, you mentioned that you did like the whole like campaigning and that type of stuff. So is that the type of side that you're interested in, or is it more like the lawyer and senator and like that type of side is
Yeah.
like are you leaning
Well,
more towards that?
yeah, so I mean, I do think that there are a lot of merits in campaign work, and I would still like never turn it down in the future. But yeah, I am really interested in right now. I am on my journey to become a lawyer. Um, hoping to apply to law school in the future, studying for the LSAT, but I really want to look at the legal side of things, um, work on cases, that kind of stuff. That's really where my niche is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the extracurriculars, like working with Senator Dingra and that type of stuff, did that kind of like align to like the what you're kind of doing in college now? I know you're not doing like the campaigning stuff, but just in general,
Yeah.
seems like
I
it's
think I think it's not exactly what I continue to do today, although I did do some later campaign work even after that in college. I worked for the Washington Senate Democratic campaign like a couple years into college, but I would say it was more of a gateway into learning that I wanted to be a lawyer because I enjoyed working in government, but I really realized that what I was mostly interested in was the law. I wanted to know how to do certain things. I wanted to, actually work. I was less of a policy maker and more of a legal actor, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And you did do like, I think I vaguely remember you did like speech and debate
I
in
did do speech and debate in high school. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Mason has, although I don't do it now, but Mason does have a debate team and a forensics team, and they're amazing.
wow.
But yeah, speech and debate, I was the president in high school, and that was super fun.
So did that kind of like solidify the lawyer aspect too? Like,
Yeah, I mean, people who do debate, it's definitely a really good look into what being a lawyer is like. And I've worked with many, many lawyers. So yeah, and yeah, that's what it is like. It's learning how to come up with coherent arguments and arguing them well. I
yeah.
think that's also like if you're someone who has to write a lot or has a humanities major, honestly, I would say that knowing how to argue a point through writing is one of the most important things you can learn.
I feel like it's important for like any professional field
Yeah,
too.
no,
Learning how to
yeah,
articulate
yeah.
your
Like
thoughts
you'd
is
be
important for like
surprised
any
how
field.
many freshmen, and I've taught college students come into college with like no idea how to write a thesis, and it's really sad to see because professors get frustrated. And I highly recommend you take a writing class when you come to college. It's like the crux of everything
I swear, for like any major, doesn't
for any
matter.
major, but humanities most of all. any major though.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're close to like DC. Was that like a big like a make or break for you in deciding between like George Mason and like other colleges?
Honestly,
Or
it was a pretty big point. It wasn't like the most important thing, but it was up there, like top three decisions. And that was because I knew from a really young age that I wanted to work in DC. It was like the capital of the country with all political connections, and even just the proximity of being there, the amount of um we've gotten to speak to so many amazing guest speakers. We've had really cool guests. We got to speak to Terry McAuliffe, who is a former governor of Virginia. Um, who else? I've met Mayor Catherine Reed, who is Mayor of Fairfax, Virginia. She actually graduated from Mason, the same program that I did, which was really
wow.
cool. I have her number in my phone. She's great. Uh, we also had Vice President Kamala Harris come to our campus. We all got to say hi to her. She was really sweet. But yeah, so we've had some really great speakers. So even just the proximity is amazing. But like I said, I've now had the privilege to work in Washington, D.C. with the D.C. Public Defenders this past summer, and it's an amazing experience. So I'm really glad that that was one of the main decisions that I took in coming here.
And when you mentioned like you're wanting to like stay and like work in DC, it kind of gives you like an insight into like that life when you're going to college there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It just like it kind of are you asking about like the experience
Oh no,
of
I'm
D?
just like statements.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think it's sorry. So I've been more clear. So you kind of like did like the whole like defense, poli sci, legal stuff. So has that kind of like evolved like your understanding, current understanding of those like fields, or has it kind of just like been the same like interest and you kind of like first impressions of the field? Were they kind of the
Yeah.
same?
No, it's definitely changed. Like the first senator I ever worked for was a federal prosecutor. And, and that was really amazing to me at the time. And I thought that was great. And now I've gotten to work for a defense firm. And now I see how important it is and I was in juvenile trial. So every single one of my clients was under 18 years old, which had a really huge impact on me because, seeing these kids you know, being treated by a really harsh
Mhm.
justice system, charging for felonies for like just honestly, some of these things were not all, but some of these things were just dumb things that kids do. Um, and they really needed to be rehabilitated. So it showed me how powerful, defense can be. And that's not where I started. I didn't start by seeing defense that way. Same way I thought like, working on campaigns is the greatest thing ever. And it is awesome. And it is, it's a great way to get your start. But then I also realized that like, working for a senator in a different capacity or working for government in a different capacity for federal agencies, those things are really, really powerful and amazing too. And so I think my interests within the field of government politics and law has definitely fluctuated, but it's stayed constant in that, I've always had a fascination with it. I even got a tattoo actually now. So
Ooh.
got a tattoo this summer of scales of justice over there with one of my good friends, Molly Iser. She's at Georgetown Law right now. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you kind of like worked for like defense and like prosecutors and that sort of thing. So how do you keep like the bias? Because like usually when you see a case, you may have like your personal feelings kind of play a huge role in it. How do you kind of like separate those
Yeah.
together?
These are really good questions because I've had a lot of people like when I did take a job at the public defender's office of DC, which by the way, the country's best. People there are amazing.
For sure.
Um, had people like, oh my God, how can you defend a murderer? How can you defend all of these people? And then I've had some clients do some really bad things or been accused of really bad things.
Mhm.
And I kind of had to realize that no matter what I thought about those things or whatever I had decided what was right or wrong, is that it's written in this country's laws that every person gets a defense.
For sure.
Every person gets a defense, no matter, and the best defense that they should possibly receive, they deserve. And I always like to turn the question back on the person. I was like, well, if you committed a crime, would you want to be defended in court?
Mhm.
Regardless of whether you did it or not, if that was the case, you'd think you deserve representation. So
For sure.
why shouldn't someone that you don't know not deserve it, you know? And so, yeah, I had to take my biases because it's not like we're sitting there asking these people, did you do it? Like, because we don't ask those things. It's just, this is our job because our job is a really big part of what keeps this country going, what keeps the justice system going is that there's prosecution or the government and then the defense, because the defense is for the people. And I think that even though I might be like, oh my God, this is horrible, I get comfort in knowing that I'm still a part of working towards justice.
Yeah. So when you
Yeah.
were like working for like the defense and the prosecutors and that sort of thing, what was like your role? Like, would you like shadow or would you be like responsible for like certain like tasks?
Right. So my official role was my like position title was investigative intern.
Okay.
So what I did was investigate cases.
Mm-hmm.
So a case would come in, would be assigned to our attorney, and then would come okay, so there's this client, blah, blah, blah happened. This is what they say. I need you to go and check all of these. So we would get a file. That file would have like body cam footage. It would have, and obviously I'm not allowed to share certain details, so I'm not
Yeah,
going to
of course, yeah.
specifics, but like body cam footage, arrest reports, and all of those kinds of subpoenas for medical or phone records, school records. And our job would be to then go obtain those things. Like we had to subpoena folks to come into court to get surveillance footage from, locations so that we could go over it. Okay, do we want to, what are the positions of the cameras, et cetera, et cetera. And so it would be interviewing witnesses, potential witnesses, potential witnesses who are maybe observed what was going on or maybe who know our client, etc. So I would then be kind of running around, going out into the field, discovering these things, writing up reports and investigation memorandums to then give to my attorney because we were assigned attorneys to work for. And I specifically requested the juvenile trial division because I really wanted to be involved in the juvenile system. And we got to work in the DC Superior Court. So that is where all of our court cases were taking place. And there is a bottom floor called the JM floor, where the family courts and the juvenile courts were. So that is a specific level of confidentiality because since they're under 18, their information is not known to the public. As in, now, if you wanted to, any DC resident or any resident, if you wanted to, you could walk into a courthouse and watch any adult criminal trial. You
Wow.
can do that because it is open to the public. These trials, if they are adults, it is open to the public.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's surprising because not a lot of people know this, but you can walk into the DC Superior Court right now. And if you know what a trial is, if you know, you can go. And that's how a lot of news people get in, for example.
True. Yeah.
You know, but you can't do that for juvenile trial because they are under 18.
Yeah.
So we had to get special. There's actually not even a jury for a juvenile trial. It's only the
Really?
judge because again, their identities are secret.
Hmm.
So we had to get special permission from the prosecutor to go and be able to sit and view these things. Because we were interns, we were allowed to if we were with our attorney. And that was a really, really special experience because I got to meet my clients, I got to meet their families and like have them thank me for all the work that I did. And that's a very special, feeling to just have like a client's mom be like, thank you so much for all that you do.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's what my role was basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no,
But that was
going
a very long explanation.
no chill. It actually was like quite interesting. So like when you can like sit down on all of these like sessions and the court sessions and that sort of thing, is that like just in like the DC area or is that like any state?
I believe in most states, yeah, that adult criminal trials are open to the public.
Well, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
you can, yeah, I'm fairly, and you can fact check me on this. I know for a fact in the DC area, but most criminal trials are open. Most, not all,
Yeah.
especially it's like highly. national security or anything like that, but most are.
So
And
have you like sat down on any of them for DC or
criminal trials, yes, I have.
like the adult ones?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
because we had some other attorneys that PDS was, we would go and show our support because they were, doing these kinds of trials. Fun fact though, we were not allowed to sit in on any trials that we had investigated or any cases that we had investigated. Reason
Oh.
being, any PDS intern after
Mhm.
working there has we can be called as witnesses.
Oh.
And that is for a trial we just worked on. That is a trial for anything that we've possibly been involved in over the summer. So for example, an attorney could call me tomorrow and be like, hey, come testify. Um, and because we have this case and you investigated it and so you need to come testify in front of a jury or in front of the judge.
Wow.
They can do that. And so yeah, and so yes, I have been to adult trials before. I have seen them argue. I have seen wins. And it's been really, really cool. And I've seen both sides present their cases and everything like that.
That's
And
so cool.
I highly encourage anyone who's interested in law to find an opportunity to go and view a court case.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now going back to like the college and that sort of thing, you mentioned that you're currently like staying in like the honors college. So have you like stayed there like all 4 years or did you like ever stay off campus?
Well, okay, so being an out-of-state student, I just chose to stay on campus because
Mhm.
it's just way more convenient for me. The first year I stayed in freshman dorm, so that's like a share floor bathroom with like 12 girls, which was crazy, but it was fun. It was fun. Now I stay in a different building in which there are suite style rooms, so there's just four of us in a bathroom.
Okay.
And there's also kitchens on every floor, so you know
Nice.
there's a little bit more space. My first room was very small.
Yeah, I can imagine. So is it like just you or do you have like a roommate?
I
Or
do have one roommate,
okay.
yeah. One roommate and two suite mates. So
Okay.
there's a connected bathroom to another
Uh,
one. Yeah.
oh, cool.
Yeah.
So is there like separate housing like for like the honor students? You have to like go through like an application process or do you just request housing?
Yeah, so basically, on campus, there's normal housing, in normal, like freshman style dorms, suite style, and apartments, and also like townhouses. There's like different
Oh.
styles. But there are residential learning communities. And
Mhm.
so those are the learning communities that are kind of catered around a specific like goal or major. For example, we have a democracy lab residential learning community, which is basically for like government majors. Then
Mhm.
we have and a certain program. There's like an art one, there's a computer science one, engineering. There's several residential learning communities in the honors college. There's like a underclassmen level, like a lower level, and an upper level for upperclassmen, and that's where I am right now.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so that's where I've been staying. So I did stay all 4 years. But yeah, there's an application process where you can apply to live in an RLC.
Mhm.
That's again residential learning community. If you would like to,
Mhm.
if you don't want to, then you don't have to. But it does help because you're basically provided an automatic community to get to know.
Mhm. For sure. So do most like upperclassmen stay on campus or do they usually go off?
From what I know, a lot of them get apartments. There are
Yeah.
apartments on campus.
Mhm.
There are apartments on campus and off campus. So I know a lot of them that do that, but I also know some upperclassmen that stay on campus in different buildings across. So it really depends on, you and what your preference is. Obviously, having a car helps, but it really depends on the person.
Okay. So like how would you describe like George Mason's campus in like general? Is it like you mentioned like you have like your Paul like your the Char school. So is it like a bunch of like schools divided by majors and then you're just kind of like in one big community or is it like just one big community of these like each individual schools that you just like attend classes with?
Right. So, well, obviously there's the Shar school, that's SCHAR. That is the policy school. So there are different like schools, meaning there are different departments. They're essentially different departments.
Okay.
And so those are the departments each person goes to for like advising or like whatever other major specific help that they need. And so that's what they do. But essentially you can take classes with people from entirely different majors. And that's part of the beauty of the honors college, is that everyone in the honors college isn't the same major. There are
Oh,
so many majors here.
okay.
So if for example, if you lived in like the government or the, democracy lab learning community, you'll have a lot more people from all government related majors, but that's not the case in the honors college. We have a lot of diversity of majors. So that's been really great. And obviously, depending on the classes you take, you could be just with government students or mostly government students, or you could end up with a variety of, majors. Like I'm taking a women and gender studies class this final semester that I have, and there's a mix. So it really, really depends on, those kinds of things. But there's plenty of opportunities for people to mix because of like extracurriculars and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned like classes and like that type. So is it like a core curriculum and then you just add on like electives or like specific stuff for like your major, or is it like complete freedom, like an open curriculum type structure?
Well, let's start off with the core curriculum. So the core curriculum is kind of what every Mason student takes, except if you're in the honors college. But the core curriculum is like your usual English, math, kind of like basic level requirements. If you're in the honors college, what you do instead is you take, like I mentioned earlier, some more interdisciplinary based classes, but they all count for the same credits.
Okay.
But and then you have your majors requirements. So that's all, like for me, it would be all like the government related classes. So those apply towards my major. Note that you can't skimp out on any classes if you're in the honors college if they apply to your major. That's not how it works.
Okay.
But yeah, and you get the chance to obviously choose your electives and choose which, like for the government major, you have field study, which is after your basic level requirements. It's just like a bunch of government classes that you can take, and you can determine whether you want a concentration or not, or if you want to add a minor or not. So after a certain point, there is really just free reign for you to tack on like what classes do you want to take, what's your major, like you want to add an extra major, minor, all these kind of things.
Yeah, at UCSD for us, like our core curriculum or like our general requirements are like based on like each individual college. And then so you complete that, you complete all of the university's requirements and your major requirements.
No, they do change based on your major. Those
Oh,
basic
okay.
legal
Yeah.
requirements do change on your major, but obviously, like most schools have to take math, for example,
Yeah.
or like reading, basic English, stuff like that. But it can change based on,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you apply for the honors college when you were like originally like applying for
Yeah.
colleges in senior year, or did you just do you like once you get into George Mason and you accept, you just say, hey, I want to be in the honors college, and there's like the GPA requirements and all that checks that go through it?
Yeah. So
Or
we do like encourage people to apply because it's part of the application. You just like, I want to apply to the honors college, and you have to
oh,
just write
okay.
an essay.
Mhm.
But we do offer a chance for incoming people to apply for the honors college, but we recommend you do it by your sophomore year just because you need the chance to like get those credits and take those classes. But yeah, so it ideally you apply by an early deadline
Mhm.
for the honors college, but then you can also technically do it once you get in if you didn't know beforehand, but it's usually recommended, at least I would recommend apply when you apply for the school.
Okay. So
Yeah.
when you get accepted into George Mason, like the honors college, if you're rejected from it, are you rejected in general from George Mason, or can you still be in?
No. You could still get into the school, but not into the honors college.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not an automatic rejection. Obviously, if you get rejected from the school, you are going to
Yeah.
get rejected from the honors college, but not the other way.
Okay. So like you mentioned like the clubs and like Greek sororities and like that sort of thing. So if like somebody say wanted to go into like the political science, the lawyer field, are there like certain extracurriculars or clubs that you would recommend that they do in their time at George Mason or just in any college or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would definitely, there's so many, it really depends. I would argue that for your extracurriculars, like just do something that you enjoy and you have fun with.
Mhm.
You'll have plenty of time to tack on internships, etc. But if you really, really want to like spend more time in that sort of sphere, we have a debate team. There's a forensics team, which is basically speech.
Mhm.
But it's called forensics. Don't ask me why. There is mock trial. In law school, there is something called moot court, which is essentially what it sounds like, and
Mhm.
and it is like very important to sort of showcasing your skills. So mock trials are a great way to practice that.
Mhm.
Trying to think of what else. There's all sorts of things. There's a lot of schools have programs that are specific to their university. So for example, we have a lot of like policy related programs. We have like Undocumented Mason, which is a program or like an extracurricular club dedicated to helping undocumented students
Mhm.
and helping them, get the resources they need. We have a pre-law group on campus that helps students study for the LSAT and, helps bring in guest speakers to walk people through the law school application process and any questions they may have. So I would really encourage people, or if you're applying to college, to like look at the schools you're applying to and kind of see what they have. And if you're interested in that, like definitely get involved if you can.
Okay. So I know you've done like internships, like you mentioned, like you did with the public defense, and you've done it with like lawyers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like, how do you prep or like practice like for these internships? Like, what's the timeline? Like, when do you apply? Is there
Yeah.
like anything that you have to do before applying for
Yeah,
them?
yeah. Well, the first thing is I just want to say, like, in order to like get an internship,
Mhm.
reach the most important thing is networking. Network, 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 network. That's like the first thing that I can tell you when preparing for internship. Talk to as many people as possible. You
Mhm.
never know when someone you're gonna run across is like, oh yeah, my company that I work for has an internship. You have no idea. And don't be afraid to cold email people. I've done it. Worst thing they can say is no
Yeah.
or not respond. But best thing they can do is to be like, okay. I literally got one of my internships that way. Is I cold emailed the executive director of the
Wow.
South Asian Bar Association. I did. And I was like, this looks really cool. Like, do you have anything for me to do? Because I just want to learn. And she was like, actually, we just had someone quit and we have this really big thing coming up. Would you like to be like like an administrative assistant for like the duration of the summer? We'll even pay you. And I was like,
Wow.
a lot more than I was expecting, but yes. And it was really great. Like I got to plan an event and I got to work alongside lawyers in an administrative capacity. And that was just cold emailing.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend you do it. In terms of a timeline, so the way I've seen it really work for government is, well, if you go on any like usual website, like if you want to work in like a government, like for state government or federal government, they usually have deadlines. So like for fall, spring semester, and then so there's usually fall internships, spring internships, and then summer internships. Those are usually where the main three times of year. Summer internships do tend to be a little bit more competitive
Mm-hmm.
because no one is in school during that time. But if you do have the time in your schedule, go ahead and do a fall or spring internship. But just remember, school is the most important thing. So
Mm-hmm.
just remember that. But yeah, so I would definitely recommend. So like if you're applying for a fall, look into things at the beginning of summer. If you're doing for spring, look into things like the beginning of fall. If you're doing things for summer, it can kind of end up being pretty late before sometimes even though you are looking at the beginning of a season, usually things are posted mid to end season. For some reason, in my experience, government and law internships tend to be on the really late side of things, which is really different than like STEM internships, but they tend to be on the late side of things unless you're applying for like a really big position in government, like intelligence, like CIA, FBI, or White House internships. Those tend to be like well in advance. So just do some research. Highly recommend doing some research about those kinds. Like PDS, for example, was one of the rare few that was like a few months, like 5 months in advance before they started reviewing. Like
Wow.
for the summer internship, I submitted my application. The deadline for applications was like February.
Oh,
Yeah, so because they wanted to um interview people, they interviewed people and then they, sent out like acceptances like in April.
okay.
Reason being they had like over 600 applicants and they only chose 30 people. So really, really depends on the competitiveness. Do as much research as you can, really. And then work on your resume, send it to as many people as you can. Professors will 100% be willing to look over your resume, um, all those kinds of things. I will say this, and people might not like this. I know a lot of people say to ask their parents. I would argue that unless your parent is a direct,
Mm-hmm.
like in your field and has been there and is like up to date on those things, I would refrain from asking your parents or at least take their advice with a grain of salt, because their resume is likely not as updated to the current standards of what employers are seeking. And I'm not saying their advice is bad. I'm just saying that if you want to do that, I would look at old and like talk to old employers that you've had and ask them to look over things. Like I've had old employers be like, hey, if you ever need, send me your resume, I'll look over it. Professors, writing centers. So a lot of people have writing centers on your campus that can look over those things. Counselors, God knows what. But just be aware that you want your resumes to be reviewed by people who are very active in that field now. And I'm sorry, this is a very long answer. And one final thing, in government and law, a lot of people will ask for two things, and that is a cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is a cover letter. I don't like cover letters. I will make this very clear. I don't like cover letters. I don't know why they exist. They're basically your resume in
Mm-hmm.
prose form for whatever
Yeah.
reason. But the reason behind them is they want to know that you can write. They want to know that you can make an impassioned plea for your job, even
Mm-hmm.
though obviously you're interested if you're applying. But the thing about showcasing that you can write can be really important.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I hate them because I do think that that can come across in the second example, which I'd rather people ask for than the first, is
Mm-hmm.
a writing sample. And a writing sample, depending on the requirements of the job, usually like a 5 to 10, maybe even 15, but usually 10 paper of you passionately writing about something. And it's usually they want to see an argumentative paper that you've written in your time in school. And so
Okay.
you usually want like that paper you got like an A plus plus on, that's probably the one you want to submit. One that makes an argument for something.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, arguably you probably want to have it somewhat government or law related, but if you have something like maybe humanities related that's really good,
Mm-hmm.
you could still turn that in. I'm just saying like don't like you could even turn in a biology paper, but I'm just saying like maybe refrain from the biology paper if
Mm-hmm.
you have like maybe a really good English paper you could turn in, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. God, the sun is making me look so shiny. But yeah, that's a general process of like writing. Cannot stress how much I do not like cover letters.
No, I'm not a fan of those either, too. Because they're basically like, why do I want the position? Like, I'm sending in my resume, I'm
Yeah,
explaining
what do you
why I
mean?
want
Why do
it.
I want it?
Yeah.
It's like, or
Which is
it's like,
basically the same
how
thing
do
as
you
your
know that
resume.
you're interested? Because I
Yeah.
yeah.
So, you mentioned like these like certain like skills that like the things that people have to like do, like the networking, cold calling, that emailing, that sort of a thing. But what sort of specific skills or like qualities do you feel like somebody that wants to go into like pre-law or political science have, or that they like should develop in college or in high school?
Yeah. Well, I've already said one, which is writing.
Mm-hmm.
Really, please learn how to write. By that, I mean learn how to write an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Learn how to say, okay, this is the point of my paper, and here are all the reasons why I support that point of my paper. Um, I've also learned recently, this is a recent thing that I've learned, is that there's a very big difference between Writing and this is something a lot of college classes do, which I don't like, is that they encourage you to write fluff.
Yeah.
Every single college class usually gives you like a paper or a word limit. Usually people are trying to fulfill that word limit, so they add a bunch of extra words that in legal writing you really don't need. And don't stress about this too much, you'll kind of learn about it over time, but that's a big thing. Just learn writing is the biggest thing. In terms of like specific traits, learn how to be well spoken. A lot of people suggest that if you are not great at public speaking, take a theater class. I've never taken one, but I know a lot of people that suggest taking like an improv or a theater class so you learn how to think on your feet and able to speak coherently and eloquently. Because that's another really important thing. You need to be able to, if you're networking, you want to be able to talk to someone, you want to be able to showcase that you know things while also, showing your true personality, because people can see that and they're like, okay, this person's, like charismatic. Okay. Like you could talk me into giving you a recommendation or like, a referral or anything like that, and that's very important. Don't be afraid to like go for it and just kind of be like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this, because people who have been professionals, they get flattered when they see that like a young person wants their help and they're willing to help. They're willing to be that mentor figure. They're willing to give you tips. Like, don't be afraid to be a little bit bold and kind of just be like, hey, so, I I know that you work for this firm. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, don't be afraid to do that. So learn the networking game, really. LinkedIn is your best friend. Do research on people, do research on guest speakers. Don't be afraid. Talk to professors, because a lot of them have full-time jobs outside of teaching. That can be really cool. Like a lot of professors do research on the side. So if you're someone who's interested in research, you can work with them on research topics. So that's a very important thing. Okay, so what did I cover? I said writing, being, learning how to network and speak. Let's see, what else? Honestly, just learn how to get along with other people. I know this sounds really weird, and I am the type of person who avoids group work, but you're gonna have to learn to work with people you don't like. That's just a fact. You're gonna work with people that you like really, really wish you just never had to talk to, but that's how it is. So that learn professionalism when it comes to those things. I had to work with someone this past summer who, obviously I'm not gonna speak too ill of them, but we did not get along and it was really hard to work with them sometimes. And I had to consistently remain professional because it was so hard. But it paid off, because of that professionalism, if when things went awry, I still had the faith of my supervisors and my attorney, which was the most important thing. So yeah, those are the things I would say that would really help you succeed.
And I feel like the skills that you mentioned are actually important for like any field. Like for whatever the field is, you kind of need these skills just to function too.
Learn how to market yourself. That is the biggest thing in any field, really, especially law, is you need to sell. That sounds so bad if I was like, you need to sell yourself, but you do. You need to market yourself. You need to know how to be like, hey, a bunch of those people in that line have the same resume as I do, but this is why you should pick me. Because my personality is different, my drive is different, my, intuition is different, my inquisitiveness is different. Those kinds of things help you stand out. But the ability to even argue that, you need to know how to do.
For sure.
Yeah. So and a lot of this comes over time. Like, don't expect to get it tomorrow, but you'll learn. And it helps better when you have like a mentor to help you.
And doing all these skills can really like put you in the front and like stand out too.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like people are there to help you. Like I have never really ran into someone who I'm like, hey, like I would really love to pick your brain on this, and they've been like, actually, I don't have time for you. Like,
doesn't happen.
And even if they do, there's a million people other than them that are willing to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do you manage everything? Like how do you balance like your coursework and you're graduating early, so it's a little bit added to pressure and like law school, LSATs, like how do you balance everything? Like how
Well,
do
I'll be frank, it's a work in progress.
Mhm.
There are days where I'm better at it, and there are days where I'm not so good at it. And the thing is, so far, what I've been trying to do, at least this semester, is try to have like one day a week where I'm doing something that's just fun for myself. You know, like just something. Today is the day where I'm just gonna do something fun. And this week, I'm going to the Cunnin Gill show
Oh
in
wow.
Washington, D.C. So if you guys don't know who Cunnin Gill is, he's an Indian comedian. I love stand-up comedy. So I decided to go to that show because I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna have fun. So I've tried to do that to sort of keep my mental health well. In terms of managing, I personally write things down. I have a to-do list, I have a planner, I have a calendar, like I write everything down. I'm making sure that I stay on top of those things. And I section out time, time management. Oh, that's another thing. Oh my God, when you go to college, learn time management. So for a lot of people, that's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Megan, I'm sure you can attest to this.
Yeah,
Like,
no, for 100%. That's why I
yeah,
was like, when you mentioned it, I was like, oh my God, that is so true.
right.
First quarter, I was like, I can't do this.
No, yeah, because in high school you're like constantly around your parents that are nagging you or your teachers that are nagging you, or there's so much work that you don't have time to not do something. But it's not that way in college. You have ample time and you feel like, oh, I don't really have to do anything, blah, 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 blah. And then you realize, oh wait, I have laundry to do, I have that assignment to do, I have that other assignment to do, and now I have a test because you weren't managing your time. And
Yeah.
it is, for me, what works is writing it down. For other people, what might work is like, just saying it, keeping it in their head. I don't know. I don't know how people do that. I have to write it down. But yeah, just spreading out your time and keeping time for yourself, allotting time for yourself. Because the hardest thing for me is to just shut off my brain and not think about work is the hardest thing for me. And to not feel guilty afterwards because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna die. Oh my God, I should have totally spent that time doing something. No, just to separate myself from that, it makes everything else a little bit easier because I'm like, okay, I worked, now I had fun, now time to work again. And that balance kind of helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I was like that. I used like the first quarter in college, I was the one that always like kept things in my head. Like I have to do this X, Y, and Z. And then when I get home, I'm like, what, I'm missing something. Like, what do I have to do? Like, what was it?
Yeah.
And after that, I was like,
Uh,
no.
yeah, I will say this, a lot of colleges, here, I'll show you mine. A lot of colleges give out free planners,
Really?
especially to freshmen. Like you can see these all the time, like at events.
Oh,
Like just as merch they'll give out. Like they often give these to freshmen, but here's the one for I can't. The thing
oh,
is blurring it.
yeah.
Sorry.
But you can kind of see
It's
it. Yeah.
right there. And like I just write my stuff in it. Like here's now hold on. Trying to find the one for today. Look, I have like all of my appointments. Look at it, 4:15 p.m. podcast with Meghna on there. So, I have like, okay, I have like an interview and then like, oh, the Cunnin Gill show is on here, all that stuff right in there and it helps.
hmm And now there's also like a bunch of like digital tools like Google Calendar, Notion, sticky
Yeah.
notes. It's just a bunch of like the digital stuff too. Like if you're more into like the digital things.
Yeah. If you're into the digital thing, do the digital thing. Like I also have a to-do list like on my phone that I can just
Huh?
click off. But something about writing it down, that's like the best
Okay.
way that I get
Yeah.
it out.
You were always like that type. Like I remember even like high school, if I ever like forgot something, there was nothing that Daksha had ever forgotten. There was nothing. She would remember
I did
everything.
write everything down in high school because I had to.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
was
oh my
always
God.
like Daksha. Like if I would ever like forget an assignment, I'd be like the first person to go to would be Daksha because she has everything written down.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think it was because everything about that school was so digital. I had to write things down. We were on our computers like so
Yeah.
much of the time that like, it's good to disconnect.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like some people like when you went to like college, they're like, oh my God, there's just like so much like you're using like the computer. And I was like, I don't feel like any different because this is what I did in high school too.
Yeah, no, it's just like I think people are very different approaches to college too. Like my sister, she just started college like a couple
Huh?
weeks ago, actually. So
Yeah.
she was already out of her dorm and doing all sorts of things. Meanwhile, since I came from the other side of the country and I was like low-key terrified because I didn't know where anything was. I was like kind of like hiding out in my dorm, just trying to be like, going on, going on, which like not the way to go. Don't do as I say, not as I do. I would try and explore more. I know firsthand how scary it is being super far away from home and not knowing where anything is, but you will get the hang of it. I pinky promise. Pinky
Yeah.
promise you'll figure it out.
Yeah. And exactly, like there was like so many days where like I didn't have like friends to go out or they were like busy or something.
Exactly, right?
I would
Yeah.
just be like, yeah, you know what? I'm stepping out because I really need to.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
even
you
if
get
it's just
tired
for a
on campus.
walk.
Exactly.
Yeah, FaceTime people. Don't be afraid to FaceTime people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So how like you mentioned like some things like these are like the things like stand out, but like do you know like any like qualities or things that you have to be involved in that would help you like stand out even more?
I think I've covered it all, honestly. Just
Okay.
I've covered most of it. My biggest thing is, okay, here's another thing.
Uh-huh.
Be careful about resume stacking. I say that because so resume stacking is kind of what I like to describe as someone who's just basically putting things on your resume just for the sake of putting things on your resume
True.
and not because you actually enjoy it.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that is because I've met some people like that, and the truth is that, I mean, at least for law school, people see right through it. People can see right through when you're just adding things on there because it's hard for you to talk about it
Hmm.
because you're not able to truly explain or express what that, internship or opportunity or experience meant to you.
Hmm.
And I think it's much better if you're able to maybe not have 20,000 things on your resume, but instead you have like a few, like 3 to 4 things that you are really, really passionate about, because that's what stands out. Because if law schools only accepted people who like had internships and worked in super big law firms, they would not have that many people.
Hmm.
The truth is that they want to see who you are, and that's what colleges want to see too. And forget, you know, secondary education. I mean, like even just normal colleges, they don't need to see so many things on your resume. They just want to know that you can talk about what is on there. And
Hmm.
so please just avoid resume stacking, because I see some people that are just like, oh, and I'm gonna add this, and I'm gonna add this, and I'm gonna add this. And I'm like, what do any of these things have to do with each other?
Yeah,
Like, all I see is someone who is, I mean, eager to do a lot of stuff, but that doesn't tell me anything about you.
exactly.
So
Again, that goes for like all fields. And kind of like you should treat like a checklist. It should be like something that you really want to do.
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously you want to get experience, and that's perfectly valid. Like if you're not the type, if you want to add something because you need the experience, absolutely. But again, just don't do it because you want to seem just more impressive.
Yeah. So we talked like a little bit about like the whole like law school and like that type of thing. So like what is like the actual like timeline for like how do you apply and like
Yeah,
LSATs and like if you could just like touch a
the
little bit.
whole law school shebang. Okay, yeah. So law school is it's tough. I'll just say that right off the bat. So for law school, basically what you're doing is law school's 3 years long.
Okay.
And I mean, classes of law school are basically will help you become a lawyer.
Mhm.
So there's 3 years. So there's 1L, 2L, and 3L. And so how it usually works is that in the fall, and I'm saying just normal fall, whether you're senior or you've graduated or whatever, you do have to be either a senior in college or older to apply, or graduated. And that's a great thing about law school. You could not you could take several gap years and still apply
Mhm.
to law school. There is no major that is unlike med school. But I know you have to take I'm so sorry. You have to take like so many bio and chem classes and prerequisites. Law school is not like that. You could have a computer science degree and still go to law school.
Really?
Yes,
You don't
any
need
major.
prerequisites at all? Or
Oh, that's
oh,
the greatest thing about law school, is that anyone of any field can apply to law school. In
wow.
fact, it's almost encouraged because it provides diversity. If you're a computer science engineer or, whatever else, and you want to apply to, law school, your only really reason when you apply is maybe to know why. Maybe all you should be able to say is maybe why. Um, so yeah, that's one really cool thing. So the way the application process usually starts out, and I also say this, don't go to law school unless you're like 100% sure you want to be a lawyer. Don't go to law school unless you're 100% sure, because law school is very difficult. I don't say this to scare people. I just say this to like be sure, because it's a tough process. It requires hard work and smart work, and you can still work in the legal field without being a lawyer.
Okay.
Don't go to law school because you feel like it's the next necessary step. You can go into research, you can go into government, you can do so many, you can even be a paralegal without without going to law school. So yeah, I mean, that does require certification in some states, but you don't have to. Okay, so you basically, what most applications open on September 1st. So that involves every school requires a personal statement. Personal statement is just kind of like what you use to apply to undergrad. It's just the main essay of who you are. Every school has a slightly different, prompt. In the wake of, deferred, or sorry, administrative action, not, sorry, administrative, affirmative action being removed. Those prompts have changed a little bit. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Do a lot of research into your law schools. So that is, that's your main personal statement. A lot of law schools also have supplemental statements that you can add. Highly recommend doing those, especially if you really want to go to law school. So that's that. But the two most important things are your LSAT and your GPA. GPA is very important to maintain. LSAT is also very important to maintain. The LSAT is out of 180, so that's the highest score. That's like a perfect score. Less than 1% of people get that. But the average population's LSAT score is about a 152, 153, which is what most people get, but like the average population gets. But to get into a tier 14 school, you kind of want to aim high 160s or higher.
Okay.
Ideally 170s or higher. But anything really above a 165, you're pretty good.
Okay.
But that's the general. But once you hit 170 and above, less than 2% of people get above that. So it's definitely, law school is very competitive. GPA, self-explanatory. The GPA is actually weighted on something called a CAS system. And so that kind of levels the playing field regardless of how your university calculates GPA. All of this is available on the LSAC website, so I highly recommend familiarizing yourself. That's where you do your applications. That's where you register for LSAT. That's where all of that information is on the LSAC. So that LSAC stands for Law School Admissions Council. So it's just one thing. Make an account today. Just familiarize yourself with it. So back to the application process is that you want to apply pretty much to your top schools as soon as possible. Earlier, usually the better. And so that's kind of on obviously each school has their, early action or, early decision deadlines. And you kind of apply. Law school applications basically almost go from September to April, about April or May before you get your responses. But most application deadlines are February or March. However, please do not apply in February or March. That is very late. It's very late. I would recommend getting all of your applications in by latest like November, December. Latest November, December. But yeah, for the LSAT, you kind of want to start studying, I would recommend in like your junior year. It takes a lot of time, or unless you're taking multiple gap years, in which case up to your pejorative. If you want to go straight through, less and less people are doing that nowadays. Law schools are actually looking pretty favorably upon gap years, because it shows that you can, work, that you have work experience, that you can and it's good when you are looking for jobs after law school, because firms or public interest groups now realize that you have work experience. It can be really beneficial for you. But either way, save yourself plenty of time to study for the LSAT before you apply. Would you like me to break down the LSAT as well?
If you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So the LSAT is 4 sections. There have been a lot of changes in the past few years. There was a change made like today that I was informed of.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been changing a lot because of the pandemic.
Mm.
So pre-pandemic, it was I think it was still 4 sections, but it was on paper.
Okay.
And the pre-pandemic, please make sure I'm saying pre-pandemic, there was logic, reasoning, logic games, and reading comprehension, or analytical reading. That has now changed. It is now 3 sections with a 4th experimental ungraded section.
Oh.
So that means there are 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comprehension section, and then a duplicate. So the experimental reading could be a duplicate of either logic reasoning or reading comprehension. So that makes up the 4.
Okay.
And each section is 35 minutes. 35 minutes long, and can vary between 23 to 27 questions depending on the type.
Okay.
So that there's also a writing component. It used to be that you were just kind of given a prompt and then a couple of sides, like arguments that you could argue, and then you had to write a sample. But now it has turned to more of you're given a prompt and you have to write a more argumentative paper about it. And this basically opens up about 8 days before the actual LSAT test date, so you can do it at home. So you don't have to, you can just open it up, it'll show up, you just do it. And the best thing about the writing sections, you do have to do it once, but once you have a writing sample in, you never have to do it again, even if you retake the LSAT.
Oh,
you
cool.
only have to do it once. They just need one on file to show that you can write. They want to know the reason they have this is because writing is important for law school. They want to see that you can write and that you can write under pressure. It is not a part of your 180 out of 180 score, but your LSAT score will not be released until you complete this. So yeah, so it's not included in grading, but you have to complete it in order to get your LSAT score.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't forget to do that, because your score is not going to happen if you don't. Another addition that they just told, like I just found out today, is that originally you could only take the LSAT a maximum of 5 times in your life and a maximum of 3 times within a given testing year. That means the testing year is from August to June every year, and you can only take it 3 times during that time.
Yeah.
However, it has now changed to 7 times in your lifetime and 5 times within any given testing. At least I just got this email today.
Okay.
And fact checking it, but like I was just informed that that was the case. Which was interesting. I'm actually just gonna give me a second to double check this, just so I can check these emails from I think like Test Masters. But yeah. Yep. It was just, I think, updated that was the case. But again, you only have to take it once.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty much, I think I've covered everything. You do have the option to cancel your LSAT score if you pay extra for that. You can cancel, but it does not erase the fact that you took it. So it will just show up as canceled score or null, like nothing, but people will still see that you took it, and it still does count towards how many you've taken.
Oh.
Yeah. So
if you're, like submitting it to like the law school admissions, they can like see that you took the test and you canceled it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but they won't be able to see what score you got.
Okay.
That being said, law schools don't super score. They only take your highest score. They do not care about, the worst score that you got. They only look at the highest score. Unlike, I think, the ACT or SAT, some of which super
Yeah.
score, I think ACT super scores, but that's
Mhm.
not the case with law schools, which is great for those of us who, standardized testing.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that's pretty much the general gist of the LSAT. You do have to pay, I think 220,
Okay.
240, it varies, dollars for to take it. But you can get fee waivers if you are eligible.
Okay.
You can also, if you have applied for accommodations, you can get accommodations on the LSAT. So that is extra time, breaks, whatever you need, as long as if you've gotten accommodations at any point in your life before, it should be fairly easy to just transfer that paperwork over. You
Yeah.
do have to register for an official LSAT date before you
Mhm.
apply for an accommodation. But that's just the breakdown of the LSAT. Any other information or questions you have, go to the LSAT website. All
Okay.
of them will be there. All the answers will be there. You can call them if you have more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to like share, what like is there like certain like prep companies that you've used or that you recommend, or like certain websites that you recommend checking out if they need like content help or that sort of a thing?
Yeah.
Only if you're like willing to share.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, the first thing that I would recommend is getting a Law Hub subscription. So that
Mhm.
what that is you can get it through LSAC, and some LSAT prep companies like bundle their prep course with that. But basically what it does is it gives you access to all the previous tests.
Okay.
And you do
Wow.
need to pay like a yearly subscription of like $110, I think, to access that. But it is really worth it because then you get unlimited range of tests and then drills made from those tests that you can just, work on. And so I really recommend, again, I think there's also potentially a fee waiver for it, but it
Okay.
is really, really valuable to study with Law Hub because that's like the main LSAT one. Now the two biggest, there's so many prep companies, but the two biggest ones I've seen the most success on are Seven Sage. I've used that one before. It's very good. And LSAT Demon. And those are the two big, like the two biggest ones that I've seen the most people recommend.
Okay.
And so those are prep companies that have a multitude of services. They have packages that range, that you can use for, like drills to drill yourself on questions, prep tests, tutoring packages, live classes that you can attend, like a group class where an instructor is teaching a certain subject or walking you through a certain question that you can then attend. Again, it varies based on how much you pay or the package that you pay. But and Seven Sage even has like admissions advice on
Okay.
there. Yeah, and so it again really depends. Some people go for books, which can be great. I know the Power Score LSAT Bibles are very popular. But yeah, it really just depends on what your learning style is. Definitely check them all out. What I would recommend before you do any of that is to take a whole diagnostic. And what that means is, and you can access these on LSAC for free. I think they give you like 4 or 5 free tests before you even apply for Law Hub. But
Okay.
my guess is you're gonna run out of 4 or 5 tests when practicing because you're gonna want to take a lot of tests, a lot of practice tests. But a cool diagnostic is basically when you kind of go in without any sort of pre-studying or anything like that and just take a test. And that can kind of give you your baseline score. Don't feel too bad about what this baseline score is, because it your first point jump is going to be pretty big after some studying. It's only after you get to like the mid 160s and higher that every small point increase becomes much harder. Like that is really where you got to put in that extra work. But you can get from 150 to a 160 maybe on slightly easier if you just do some studying, if that was your baseline score. So don't feel too bad about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's those are the kinds of ones that I've seen. I know Princeton has one. I know Testmasters has one. There's
I
so
think
many.
Blueprint does too, don't they?
Which
Print?
Blueprint? I think so. I know Kaplan has one. There's like so many. Check check them all out. I know there's like so many representatives willing to give you their pitch on that. So it really depends on what your learning style is. But I
Okay.
know LSAT Demon and Seven Sage are like the two really big ones.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's it of questions that I have.
Yeah. They're very good questions.
Thank you. Those were like the questions that like when I was like reading like more about like law and that sort of thing, like before this, I was like, these were like the questions that I mostly had. Or
Yeah.
like the questions that got asked to me when I was like applying to like colleges, like, hey, why'd you choose this location, that type of stuff. And it kind of like varies for every person, like every field. So that's why I was like, I had to
Yeah.
like, yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to like if you guys ever want to reach out to me with any more questions. My email is Daksha Mag, so that's DAKSHAMAG02 @gmail.com. You can definitely reach out with any questions you have. Just introduce yourself. So a lot of people
I can
email
add
me
to like the
and I have
description
no
box.
idea who they are. Huh?
I can add them to the description box too.
Yeah. Or comment down below with your questions, and we can definitely answer them if you have any. Or maybe Meghna can get the answer from me and post a follow-up, whatever. But yeah, those are just the really big parts of it. Again, please do your own research. Everything I've said is true. Say that. But if you have further questions, there are many resources online. Probably many resources in your everyday life, such as teachers, counselors, all those kinds of things, professors. So
Yeah.
reach out to them.
I definitely recommend like professors for like any field because even if you just need like a rec letter, like swear they don't even know who you are until you like meet with them like 3, 4 times. They honestly don't know because they have like it's like ranging from like 500 like 100 to like 500 in each class. So it
Yeah.
becomes like hard for them to keep track too.
That's also another thing. Please network with your professors because you can become really close with your professor and they can, if that allows them to speak better of you because law schools ask for recommendation letters and they usually like it or prefer, unless you've been out of school for a really long time, they prefer that you ask a professor for recommendation letters. And so because of that, it's someone who can speak to your skills in an academic setting. And so highly recommend introduce yourself on the first day of class so they remember you.
And office hours too. Those are important.
Office hours. Go to office hours. So many
Mhm.
people don't want to, but you should.
Yeah, I was like that type of person too, but don't follow me on that. Yeah,
Yeah, no, if you have, use your resources. The
hmm
biggest thing.
for sure.
Yeah. Of
Thank you so much, Daksha.
course.